Scott and
Chris.
And we're coming to you live from the Teaching and Learning Center in the library upstairs, and hoping that next time we do one of these, you guys can join us. I've been really enjoying these discussion boards that you guys have been posting. There's a lot, you guys have put a lot of thought into each of these pieces, which is great because then you can use what you post and you can extract those parts of your own and put them into your paper, right? So all that effort and energy that you're putting into the discussion boards can later be used in your papers.
No, even my last paper, it helped out because just seeing everyone else's like input on to build a fire, I was able to like take that out for like myself. I used other people's information, but so those ideas was totally like were totally able to like help me like totally think through my paper and think about what the story was really about. So
Great.
That was cool.
Great. And then next week we're going to be doing our midterm. Don't panic. I'm going to walk you through some of what the midterm will look like, and also you guys are going to put together a study guide based on everything that you read, where you come up with questions, and half of the midterm is what the students come up with. And I will kind of steer you towards which questions I'm leaning to. And so next week, same bat time, same bat channel, we'll do a little midterm review. And so if you want to join me, that'd be awesome. And if you guys want to join me, that would be awesome. So I want to talk about the Harlem Renaissance a little bit. And there's a lecture on our site, and I hope that you've been looking at the lecture on the site because I think it's helpful, giving you a little bit of context, talking a little bit about W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington and some of those issues about assimilation and creating your own identity, and looking just at a little bit of the background of the Harlem Renaissance. But I did post a new PowerPoint because I want to talk about some of the things that led up to the Harlem Renaissance. So I'm going to bring that up right now. La-di-da. Here we go. And now, I don't know if I'm screen sharing it. Hold on one sec. So Peter, if I just bring it up, is that sharing it or?
Go back to your video.
Okay.
Right there.
Oh.
Click on it.
Click. Sorry guys.
Little green.
Little green. Okay. Now we're going to screen share. Start the screen share.
Wow, 2016 is just such a
I know. Well, I'm still learning all this. Okay. So there we go. Okay.
Now you can pull your PowerPoint out front. Just down.
Oh, sorry. Oh, and pull that up. Okay. Whew. Okay, we made it. So I want us to think a little bit about the Oscars, right?
Oh, okay.
And about the protest, right? There was a protest that not enough Blacks were being recognized for the great work that they've been doing, right? And so there was a big division about calling attention to that fact that not enough Blacks were being nominated, and some people deciding to sit out the Oscars. Well, of course, the bigger issue well before that was that there were not enough stories about not only Blacks being depicted in movies, but that there weren't enough Black screenwriters. There weren't enough Black directors. There wasn't really a Black vision. That a lot of the what was being presented were stereotypes, flat characters, one-dimensional, and it was a lot of times by people who were not of that culture, right? Like white people writing the Black roles.
They're excluded out of their own narrative.
That's right.
That's crazy.
That's right. So a lot of what the Harlem Renaissance is about taking back the narrative, right? So if you think about movies and writing and art as a kind of mirror in which you look at yourself, what happens when you look in that mirror, when you look at literature, when you look at the movies, and you don't see yourself reflected back, right? So, and what happens when those images that you do see reflected back are distorted?
Especially in such an offensive manner. It's a very bad distortion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right. A lot of the old radio programs like Amos and Andy, kind of white people playing black people, and it was very over the top. And you could imagine that if during the time of slavery, the depictions of slavery, if you only have the perspective of whites writing the story, then you become more sympathetic with the slave owner. They talk about being very righteous and religious, and then maybe the image you get of blacks is also skewed to make yourself look good. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally does.
And so there was a big call for African Americans or for blacks to take back the narrative. So let me see if I can get to the next. Oops. Nope. Okay. Hold on. Okay. So this is the idea of we're going to take back the narrative. And earlier we were talking a little bit about Frederick Douglass. So I want to read this one quote by Frederick Douglass. He says, "You remember the old fable of the man and the lion, where the lion complained that he should not be so misrepresented when the lions wrote history? I am glad the time has come when the lions write history. We have been left long enough to gather the character of slavery from the involuntary evidence of the masters." So this is, I'm no longer going to allow the one who's dominating the lion to tell the tale. I want the lions to write their own history, right? And a lot of the abolitionists were pressuring blacks to write their own experiences. And they said, you have an obligation to do this. You have an obligation to not only to other blacks, but to the world, to put out a different picture and image of what slavery is like. Mm-hmm. This was during the time of slavery. And the idea was that there's no one way of looking at slavery. There are so many different experiences of it. So it's not like we just need your story. We need your story. We need your story. Harriet Jacobs says that slavery is far worse for women than it ever was for men. Well, we need Harriet Jacobs' story, right? So the idea was there was an obligation because we need to start documenting this mistreatment that's been taking place. We need to document the abuse that's been taking place. So one is we need to archive what's been happening for history, and also as a way of creating some sort of form of transformation. And then we need to humanize slaves by telling stories.
Right. That's probably one of the important parts too, is actually humanizing them and not just like the yes ma'am, no ma'am type deal. It's like it gets very intimate at that point.
Right, that yes ma'am, no ma'am. You had like little stereotypes of the mammy figure, and of just different kind of figures, but not real fleshed out human beings. So there was a call for humanizing the slaves by having people tell their stories, and also getting rid of stereotypes in the process of telling those stories, like Chris was just talking about. And also thinking about like what can happen to you as you're writing it, that there's something kind of redemptive about just getting this out on the page, right? There's something potentially very healing, because a lot of people have felt shame and alienation, and we need to call this out. We can no longer be marginalized. And the only way to stop being marginalized is to tell our own stories. So that's this pressure that a lot of people are getting to tell their own stories. Okay. And I go to the next slide, my friends. Nope. I went back to the
Bottom arrows.
bottom arrows. Thank you. Okay. But you can tell people we need your stories, but it's not so easy,
Yeah.
right? Because first of all, we have to understand that for slaves, you were not allowed to read and write, right? You were not allowed to get educated. In fact, if you ever read Frederick Douglass, there's a pivotal moment where the wife of the slave owner has been teaching him, and then the husband comes home and he finds out that the wife has been teaching Frederick Douglass to read, and he gets very angry because by teaching him to read, you're empowering him, right? So blacks weren't even allowed to read and write. So now you're saying share your story, right? When you could get punished, right? And then also, this is Harriet Jacobs' biographer. Harriet Jacobs wrote the book Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. Her name was Linda Brent, but they changed her name, right? And she wrote Incidents of the Life of a Slave Girl, which is a really harrowing account of what it was like to not only be a woman, but a mother during the time of slavery. And as a mother, it was so painful. She was saying, I pray that I'm going to have an ugly daughter, because if I have a beautiful daughter, I know she's going to get raped or sexually exploited. So we needed to hear her story, but of course she was hesitant. So this comes from her biographer. She says, how could she tell her story when just thinking about the past was so painful? How could she write about her life when she was not a writer? How could she divulge, forgive the spelling, how could she divulge her secrets to strangers when it was all she could do to sob them into her friend's ear? She could not write her story. Write it? After being warned it might cause some to feel contempt? For years she had been unable to speak it. She could not write the book. And in fact, Harriet Jacobs reached out to Harriet Beecher Stowe and said, will you write my book? Harriet Beecher Stowe of Uncle Tom's Cabin. And she said, no, I won't write your story. I won't write your book. And so she eventually did it herself. And it was the first first-hand account from a woman that was published who experienced slavery.
It was intense. It's a very intense story. She herself was actually subjected to, by her master, by heavy sexual advances.
That's right. That's right. And she's...
It's actually 12:50. I have to take off. I have my psych.
Oh,
But
okay.
it was really
I'm
nice
going to
working
miss
with
you.
I'm gonna miss you.
Okay, Chris is going.
Nice to meet you. Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Okay. So let's keep going. So because there was a lot of discrimination and pain, people were conditioned to mask their feelings, right? Especially during slavery. And we're going to get this when we read We Wear the Mask. They were conditioned to be silent, not to express their feelings. And we're going to hear that silence was a defense mechanism. I'm going to play you a video by Maya Angelou where she also talks about this, that wearing a mask is a defense mechanism. It's a way to protect yourself. And if you remember at the very beginning of the semester, we read a piece by Mark Twain about Aunt Rachel, and she wore a mask. You know, why are you so happy, Aunt Rachel, right? When she was experiencing so much pain. So this idea of masking what you're going through was prevalent during the time of slavery. And so then when you say, tell your own story, well, what you're telling people is to unveil yourself, lift off the mask, which was not easy, but many did out of a sense of obligation. And W.E.B. Du Bois also gives you this kind of idea about masking. He says, this is from The Souls of Black Folk. It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, the sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in assumed contempt and pity. So this idea that I can never fully be in my own body because I'm always kind of outside of myself, looking at you, looking at me, or wondering how is it that you see me? How are you perceiving me? And that kind of self-consciousness, that self-awareness makes me wear a mask, right? Very powerful if you ever read The Souls of Black Folks. So the work of Blacks, especially within this context, you could see it as an act of resistance. I'm going to resist slavery. I'm going to resist this stranglehold you have on me, these kinds of depictions that you're putting out there of Blacks, of African Americans, through writing. So I want to read this quote, and this is not from an African American. This is from a Buddhist poet named Thich Nhat Hanh. He says, "The purpose of resistance is to seek the healing of yourself in order to be able to see clearly." I think that communities of resistance should be places to where people can return to see themselves more easily, where the conditions are such that they can heal themselves and recover their wholeness. So writing literature was not only a way of resisting what was happening to you, but again, it had the power to heal, to redeem. And a lot of people, like I said earlier, saw writing as a duty, right? This is the abolitionists certainly saw writing as a duty and reached out to as many people as they could and started their own papers, abolitionist papers, to get those voices out there. Langston Hughes wrote an essay called The Negro Artist and the Racial Mountain, in which he says, it's not only a duty for Black people to write, but you have to write things that are uniquely Negro. Don't run away from who you are. Don't try to assimilate or fit in or take on the conventions or styles of other groups of people. You write what is uniquely African American. So one criticism of that is that what happens when I'm telling you to write in a particular way and that all social statements are being seen through the lens of race is that you might be creating something that's kind of contrived or having too narrow of a focus. So there was a big, a lot of people followed this call to write something that's distinctly Negro or African American, and then others had some reservations about this kind of call to arms. Which leads us to the Harlem Renaissance, and again, there is a lecture on our site on the Harlem Renaissance that I want you to look at. Harlem Renaissance, we identify it as taking place after World War I and up through the 1930s, but like any of these time periods, they're kind of artificial and they're kind of fuzzy where it starts and where it ends. But this is kind of where we're seeing the great influx of African American art, music, autobiography, fiction, poetry was during this time period. And this was a time to remove the mask and take pride in your identity and heritage. That's certainly what Langston Hughes was calling for in his essay about the Negro Artist and the Racial Mountain. And so that's where we are. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get off this PowerPoint. I hope that it was helpful. Okay. Going to get off this PowerPoint. And I think we're back. Good. And so I wanted to go through some of the works. I wanted to go through, well, I want to look at We Wear the Mask, and I want to look at The Negro Speaks of Rivers. I was also going to do The Sheriff's Children, but I'm worried that this is going to go on too long and people are going to tune out. But what I could do is I could post some thoughts on The Sheriff's Children on our site, and in response to what some people have said. And certainly I wanted to do the Gilded Six-Bits too, but we're limited in the kind of time that we have. So I think if we get one by Dunbar and one by Langston Hughes, that might be a good start. And I'm hoping that this is helping. So I want to read We Wear the Mask. And so let's start with that one.
Is it in the book?
It's in the book. I don't know where in the book, but I could certainly share my copy with you.
Oh,
Okay.
Who's it by?
It's by Paul Lawrence Dunbar. Okay.
Oh, okay. I might be able to find his name.
Okay.
Oh, under.
So I'm going to read this. It's called We Wear the Mask. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. The debt we paid to human guile, with torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but O great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet and along the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask. Exclamation point. So you hear this refrain, we wear the mask, we wear the mask. And I'm hoping that some of what we talked about earlier will help us to understand that idea of masking as a way of protecting yourself, right? Masking is a way of not giving power to over people, right? Masking is a way to hold on to some sort of control and some sort of dignity, right? So when it says, why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? I don't want to be so vulnerable that you know exactly what I'm thinking, exactly what I'm going through. I don't want you to count my tears, be able to count my sighs and kind of try to fix me. And, you know, I mean, fix meaning not like I'm broken, but like I'm pegging you for in a certain way, not to box me in, create a box in my identity. So it's really about control. And while we might smile, oh great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls. What you see is you see a smile, but you don't see the torture, the sadness that's happening within. And I think of the Aunt Rachel piece from Mark Twain, and I think of Harriet Jacobs, and I think of the Sojourner Truth, and a lot has been written about this idea of the mammy figure, the woman who comes in, takes care of somebody else's kids, always with this smile on her face. But, you know, families have been destroyed by slavery. She's been separated from her own kids, taking care of somebody else's kids. So you could imagine that kind of heartbreak within, but you have to wear the mask in order to cope. We wear the mask that grins and lies, right? Any thoughts about this poem?
What I was wondering was when talking about the Harlem Renaissance, how you said that they wanted them to express their pride for their ethnicity. Like, how is that seen? Is that accepted?
Well, during the time of the Harlem Renaissance, I mean, certainly,
By like white people, like, did they say like, "Oh, you're being proud about this, like good job," or like?
I think it depends on. So Haley's asking was this work all very accepted in the mainstream? Well, you take Paul Laurence Dunbar now. He wrote another piece called "When Melindy Sings," which is in dialect, right? I'll just give you the opening stanza. It says, "Go away and quit that noise, Miss Lucy. Put that music book away. What's the use to keep on trying? If you practice twill you're gray. You can't start no notes a flying like the ones that Ransom rings from the kitchen to the big woods when Melindy sings." So he uses this kind of dialect, this kind of voice. And so there were some white critics who said, "Oh, I sort of like this because you're being true to yourself." And others who said, "No, I don't like this because you're trying to be who you're not." There were different, a lot of this work was not widely accepted at the time,
Okay.
right? But, it was increasingly more and more accepted, especially maybe in some of the more urban areas where a lot of this was more prevalent. Right?
Also, I was gonna ask about the mask. Like he's saying, like we hide what's inside, but like if they were to expose it, what they really were feeling, like what effect do you think that would have had?
You mean, so what effect would it have? It would be where maybe you might, if I'm showing you my vulnerability, where maybe you would start to pity me and I don't want your pity, or where you would start judging me and I don't want your judgment, right? Where you might feel like, where you might see me as powerless or broken, and I don't want you to see me as broken. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right.
So when they put the mask on and they don't want people to see them like that, it's like their way of having like some pride while they're being like used as slaves.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right. Now, the Paul Laurence Dunbar piece was written after slavery, but it's still capturing that
There's
feeling of
still
mask.
discrimination.
Yeah. Yes, there's still discrimination. So when you're saying, was this widely accepted? Well, there was still discrimination, right? Let me show you a video by Maya Angelou where she kind of riffs off of this poem, We Wear the Mask. And so you can hear her talking a little bit about that concept of masking. So let me bring that up. Oops. Oh, so bringing up the video. Where did it go? It was Maya Angelou. Hold on, you guys. I'll figure this out. I thought I put it over here, but I don't see it. Did it move up here?
It's not one of these.
Maybe. Oh, thank you.
And did you share that one?
No. Oh, I thought I did. I thought I did. Is there any way for me to double check?
Come back here and we'll look. Yeah, click to bring it forward. Click
Good.
here.
Okay. Sorry, guys. Hold
Go
on.
over to your green screen share. Might just be being slow. Do it one more time. My Angela.
Oh, thank you.
And click here. Bring it up.
Up. Have patience with me, everybody.
Yeah, you're good. Keep trying.
Keep
Right
trying.
there.
I'll grab it. Here we go.
And do that one.
Here we go.
I wrote a poem for a woman who got on the bus in New York City, and she used to just laugh. The bus stopped, she'd laugh. If it picked up somebody, she'd laugh. If it missed them, I looked at her and I thought, that woman is not laughing. She's simply extending her lips and making a sound. That's a survival apparatus. Laugh when you aren't to itch when you don't itch. So she could keep my people alive. So I wrote a poem for her. I used it with Paul Laurence Dunbar's poem Mask and my own poem for Old Black Men. This is it. When I think about myself, I almost laugh myself to death. My life has been one great big joke. A dance that's walked, a song that spoke. I laugh so hard, I nearly choke when I think about myself. Say 70 years in these folks' world, the child I worked for calls me girl. And I say, yes, ma'am, for working's sake. I'm too proud to bend, too poor to break. I laugh so hard, my stomach ache when I think about myself. My folks can make me split my side. I laughed so hard I nearly died. The tales they tell sound just like lying. They grow the fruit, but eat the. I laugh so hard, I start to crying when I think about myself and the little children. But then we wear the mask. They grins and lies. It shades our chits our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts, we smile and mouth myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears inside? Nay, let them only see while we wear the mask. We smile, but oh my God, our tears to thee from tortured souls arise. And we sing, Lord, the clay is bowed beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world think otherwise. We wear the mask. My fathers sit on benches. Their flesh count every plank. The slats leave dents of darkness deep in their withered flank, and they knock like broken candles, all waxed and burnt profound. They said, but sugar, it was our submission that made your world go round. They laughed to shield their crying. They shuffled their dreams. Say, step and fetch the country, and wrote the blues and screams. I understand their meaning. It could and did derive from living on the ledge of death. They kept my race alive by wearing the mask. Wearing the mask? Wearing the...
Peter, I think I'll. Oops. Hold on, you guys. Oh, Peter, I seem to have lost us.
It's okay. Oh, there you are.
Where am I?
Screen share.
Okay, we're back. Look, sorry about that. I'm just getting used to this. Hi, Kathleen.
Hi.
So that was Maya Angelou sharing "We Wear the Mask," her version, and she was riffing off of the Paul Laurence Dunbar version, and that's posted for you on our site. I want to move to another poem, and this one is by Langston Hughes, and this one is called "The Negro Speaks of Rivers." Okay. So if you might want to get that in front of you. And let's read this one. Haley, do you want to read it?
Sure. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. I looked up the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans. I've seen its muddy bosom turn gold in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient dusty rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers.
Beautiful. So again, this is Hughes talks a lot about Black pride and about the importance of writing poetry that's uniquely Negro. So I want to look at this one, and maybe we can start with the opening stanza. I've known rivers. I've known rivers, ancient. And he doesn't say I know rivers, present tense. He doesn't say I knew rivers once. He says I have known. That's present perfect tense, where you say I knew it back then, I still know it, right? This idea of that kind of continuity from way back in the days I knew rivers, and I still know it. You get the idea of time flowing like a river, and he's got one foot in the present and he's got a foot in the past, right? And you get that just with that I have known. I have known rivers, I've known rivers. So you might also look at the repetition, that kind of insistence, right? And look also at I've known, I bathed, I built, I looked, I heard. This is all being like very like I'm an active participant in all of these things. So this idea of active voice, getting away from the passive, we see that. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood and human veins. The rivers have been here before man has been here, right? And also there's a connection between the rivers flowing and the blood flowing in the veins, right? My soul has grown deep like the rivers. Just like the rivers run deep, my soul has too. And if I've known rivers for so long and I've had all this worldly experience, that would mean that my life has depth to it, right? So I think one thing is he's taking pride in his heritage, and he's talking about the kind of depth our lives, the lives of African Americans have. He says, I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. So, you know, we're talking about all these very majestic rivers, and the Euphrates also has some religious connotations to it. There are references to it in the Bible. And then we have ideas of like the Congo and the Nile, and you think of like the Nile and the pyramids, and even the idea of hard work, labor. Like I've been by those rivers. I've had all these experiences. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans. And the story of Abe Lincoln being on the Mississippi, going down and seeing slavery and the treatment of slaves firsthand. Well, I was there. And I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. We have these references to things that are muddy and dusky and they're kind of obscured, right? But he's also seen them transform, turn golden, turn like the best sides of themselves, right? I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers, and I'm the better for knowing these rivers. These rivers are part of my past, part of my present, and part of my future. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. And I see this as being a very spiritual kind of poem. Right? There are a few other Langston Hughes pieces on your that I asked you to look at, Mother to Son, and also Theme for English B. But I want to close today with one poem by Langston Hughes that's not on your reading list, but I think it might help in thinking about Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun, which is the play you're reading. So I'm going to bring it up for you so that you can see it. And I think we're going to end with this poem today. So here it is, but let me share it. Hold on one second, you guys. Oops. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is called Harlem, and it's the last piece we're going to look at today. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? Oh, am I screen sharing?
It wasn't.
It wasn't. Oh, okay, I thought it was.
Now you
Oh, okay, sorry. So I thought that was, I was sharing the screen, but evidently I wasn't. So let's look at this poem because I think it might help us think about A Raisin in the Sun, the Hansberry play. What happens to a dream deferred? Well, what happens when you have dreams, when you have ambitions, but they keep getting put off and keep getting put off, right? You can lose your motivation. You can get into a funk, into a deep depression. You can get angry as hell, and you might be filled with rage and explode because all these dreams, all these ways of making your life feel meaningful and purposeful, you can't see it to its fruition. And as we read A Raisin in the Sun, look at the dreams that people have. Look at what gets in the way of dreams. Look at what people say when you attempt to pursue your dream, or they say your dream is foolish, right? So here it's describing the dream. How do we describe it? Like a raisin in the sun. So we're using these kind of similes, a lot of like a raisin in the sun, something that is kind of withered and dried up, right? Like a grape that is dried up like a raisin, and it's just been sitting out there. Or it festers like a sore and then runs. So you can picture something kind of oozing, right? Or it stinks like rotten meat, right? You leave that piece of meat around so long and now it's just gone rancid, right? And this is all describing what it means to have your dreams deferred for way too long, that you can no longer tolerate or live with, or it crusts over. You can kind of picture that, something kind of crusting over. Or maybe it just sags like a heavy load, and I think of like an overripe avocado just sagging, or something like it's just heavy, and no one has used it. It's like all the potential that it has, it's now become overripe, and it's just sagging. Or maybe it brings you to anger, right? And I think that this poem is important for us, not only with A Raisin in the Sun, but maybe it's something that we can use when looking at other texts where dreams are deferred, right? Certainly people have dreams in the Gilded Six Bits, right? Again, there's Charles Chestnut's The Sheriff's Children and the Gilded Six Bits. I'm probably going to weigh in on your discussion board, but I think for now, we've talked a little bit about the background of the Harlem Renaissance. We talked a little bit about Paul Laurence Dunbar and Langston Hughes. I hope you find this helpful. Oops, yeah, go ahead. Sorry. So I hope you found this helpful, and please let me know, because I want to know what you like about this, what you don't like about this, what I could change for next time. This is a new tool for me, as you can see, but it's something that I want to keep working with. And with your help, we could make this a very powerful tool, not only for this class, but maybe for other classes, other instructors. And I encourage you for our next session, which is going to be a week from today, to get more of you coming here. So thank you so much for showing up. It means the world to me. And let me know if this helps. And if you have any questions, just pop it up into our questions forum. Okay? So we're going to wave bye. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Bye.